If diversification has ever felt like guesswork, here's the simple path. Spread risk across assets, geographies, and sectors using a few broad, low-cost funds, then automate contributions and let the rules do the heavy lifting. Diversification is not about predicting winners, it's about making sure no single story can make or break your results while you keep saving on schedule. Think of diversification as shock absorbers for your portfolio. The aim is to reduce the impact of any one company, sector, country, or risk driver without smothering the growth engine that comes from owning stocks. It won't eliminate losses. Market risk is the price of returns, and correlations often rise during panics. But spreading exposure intelligently smooths the ride enough to help you stay invested, which is ultimately what compounding needs from you. The mechanism under the hood is correlation. Assets that don't move in lockstep can offset each other's swings, reducing overall volatility and the chance that a single drawdown defines your experience. Perfect negative correlation is rare in real life, and relationships shift over time, so the goal isn't to optimize a precise mix with fragile stats. The goal is durable breadth across return drivers, business growth, interest rates, inflation, and credit conditions. When one driver stalls, another may carry more weight, and your plan keeps moving forward. Start inside equities. Don't bet the farm on one story like a single sector, a handful of megacaps, or one country's policy regime. Broad, cap-weighted total market funds are designed to hold large, mid, and small companies across all sectors, automatically adjusting as leadership changes. That auto-rotation is a feature. There's no need to guess which sector will lead next if you own the whole field at low cost. If you prefer a little refinement, modest tilts to well-researched factors like value or quality can be added as small satellites. The key word is modest enough to matter psychologically, but not enough to tempt tinkering when factor performance cycles turn. Next, diversify between asset classes. Stocks are your long-run growth engine and will dominate returns over decades, but they come with bigger drawdowns. High-quality bonds are the ballast. They tend to zig when stocks zag, dampen portfolio swings, and provide dry powder for rebalancing. Cash is not a growth asset. It's your emergency buffer and bridge for known near-term spending needs, so you aren't forced to sell risk assets at lousy prices. If you want an inflation-aware complement, consider real assets like REITs in a measured way. They can add a different cash flow profile and some inflation sensitivity, but still behave like equities at times, so keep position sizes sensible. Geography matters because different countries face different growth paths, policies, demographics, and currency moves. Balance home bias with global exposure by pairing a total U.S. stock fund with a broad international fund that covers developed and emerging markets. This isn't a forecast that the world will outperform the U.S. It's an insurance policy against being 100% tied to one economy's future. Keep costs low, coverage broad, and avoid pretend global funds that stealthily overweight a single region. Sector balance takes care of itself in cap-weighted broad funds, but it's still worth watching. When one sector swells, your broad index will reflect it. That's fine as long as you resist adding extra narrow thematic bets that double down on whatever is already big. If you do use sector or equal weight funds, treat them as satellites with explicit size limits and exit rules so they don't overshadow the core. For bonds, stick to diversification that actually stabilizes the overall portfolio. Blend by issuer-type treasuries, agencies, and investment-grade corporates, and by duration to shape the profile. Shorter and intermediate maturities tame interest rate sensitivity, longer durations amplify it. Treasury inflation-protected securities, TIPS, can hedge specific inflation surprises, but they're not a free lunch. They still carry duration risk. The bond sleeve's job is reliability, not yield chasing, so prioritize quality and low cost over squeezing out extra yield that often brings hidden risks. Commodities can diversify inflation shocks, but they demand caution. If you include them, favor broad, simple exposures and keep the weight small. Understand that commodity index returns blend spot price moves with collateral and roll yields, which can be a headwind depending on futures curve shape. The litmus test. If a diversifier requires constant monitoring to understand why it's behaving oddly, it may be too complex for a set wrong grow plan. A few words on currency. In equities, foreign currency exposure is part of global diversification and can help when the US dollar weakens. Hedging equity currency risk is optional and can add cost and complexity without consistently better outcomes. In bonds, by contrast, unhedged foreign currency can inject volatility into a sleeve meant to stabilize. Most investors keep core foreign bond exposure hedged or simply stick to US high-quality bonds to keep the ballast steady. Costs and simplicity are your allies. More line items often create more overlap, not more diversification, a phenomenon sometimes called diversification. A handful of broad, low-cost funds usually deliver more risk reduction per dollar of fee than a cluttered lineup of narrow products. Run an overlap audit once a year. Look through the top holdings, sectors, and country weights across your funds. If two funds own the same stuff, trim the redundancy and keep the clearer option with the lower expense ratio and better tracking. Translate all of this into a blueprint you can live with. The baseline is a global 3-fund core, total US stock, total international stock, and a broad investment-grade bond fund. If you want a small complement, add 1 or 2 satellites, perhaps a REIT index or a small value tilt capped at a combined 10–20% of your equity sleeve. Write those caps down now to prevent drift. The point is not to perfectly engineer the frontier, it's to build a robust chassis that doesn't wobble when headlines shift. Keep the US context front and center. In workplace plans like 401ks and Roth 401ks, you'll likely see index mutual funds as the dominant options, perfectly fine for the core exposures and automatic paycheck investing. In IRAs and Roth IRAs, either index funds or ETFs can implement the same blueprint at very low cost. In taxable accounts, broad equity index funds or ETFs are generally tax efficient, while bond income is often better sheltered in tax-advantaged accounts when space allows. If needed, municipal bond funds can be considered intaxable for higher brackets, but simplicity and clarity still win over optimizing every corner. Expect correlations to jump during market stress. Diversification won't feel like a miracle then, but quality bonds and cash buffers matter most in those exact windows, letting you meet expenses and rebalance toward cheaper assets without fear. That's why design happens before storms and rules govern behavior during them. If your plan relies on timing a factor flip or a currency swing to work, it isn't diversification, it's speculation wearing a disguise. Behavior decides whether diversification pays off. Fewer choices and broad building blocks reduce the urge to tinker. Automate contributions on a set cadence that matches payday. Turn on dividend and interest reinvestment so money keeps compounding between deposits. Write a simple one-page policy that lists your target weights, any small satellites and their caps, bands for rebalancing, and a rule that changes happen for life reasons only: job change, goal change, family needs not because markets got loud. Add a 24/72-hour cooling off rule before any deviation. Track streaks of contributions and rebalances as the scoreboard that actually matters. Measure what counts. Once a year, scan concentration. What percentage sits in the top 10 holdings, in the top sector, in a single country? Check that your satellites still fit inside their caps and haven't ballooned by outperformance. Review tracking difference in expenses to ensure your funds are still doing their job. Note drawdown contributions. During declines, did you add to the sleeve that fell or hesitate? That behavior metric often predicts long-term success better than past returns. You can set this up in a single session. Pick the core funds, confirm their broad and low weak cost, and define any satellites with explicit size limits. Map which sleeve lives, in which account to keep taxes quiet and rebalancing practical. Enable dividend and interest reinvestment. Schedule recurring transfers aligned to your pay cycle. Set calendar reminders for your annual review and simple alerts for rebalancing bands. Save your one-page plan where you'll see it before logging in. This connects directly back to your allocation rules. The stock divided by bond split you chose sets the overall risk level, and diversification within and across sleeves makes that risk more repeatable across market regimes. You don't need to predict which region, sector, or theme will lead next. Own them broadly at low cost, keep the satellites tiny and rule-bound, and let the plan do the heavy lifting while you keep saving. Next, lock in the habit that preserves this design: rebalancing. You'll get a simple, repeatable cadence and band system that keeps your risk in check without turning you into a day trader. What to do, when to do it, which accounts to use first, and how to minimize taxes and friction while bringing your portfolio back to target. Bring your tickers, target weights, and account list, and be ready to wire in rebalancing rules you can follow even on your busiest days.